Hey friends, welcome back to the library. Today I have with me author SZ Estavillo. I'm super excited to be chatting with you. Welcome. Tell us a little bit about how you got started writing.
Well, I have been writing most of my life. I had an agent for 5 years and we amicably parted ways. And then 3 months after we parted ways, I landed my own 3-book deal. So although I've been writing most of my life, it's taken, 4 or 5 books. I wrote around that many before one of them got published, which I feel is common in some cases. Others some people get real lucky and they query, and within a few short weeks, one of the agents like the book, and then all of a sudden they submit the query or submit to publishers, and then within 2 weeks they're in auction and they've got a 7-figure book deal. I mean, it's happened. That kind of story has happened. But in my case, my story was slightly different in the sense that I had an agent for 5 years. I was on submission with 4 of my manuscripts. I had over 150 rejections by publishers of all sizes, the big fives, bigger independent ones, smaller presses. And then I ended up planning my own book deal through a small press. So it's, I guess every author has a unique story.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, do you feel like those rejections, that deal, and now where you are, has affected any of your writing?
Yeah, it's made me more motivated to continue to write regardless of circumstances. All throughout that 5 years where I was just on submission, nothing was getting picked up. And again, in some cases, I've been in the industry for a while. I worked at television studios. I worked at talent agencies. I also worked at literary agencies. So I've been in the agent world for a while, and I have that side of my hat. I even took pitches at an LA Writers Conference a couple of years ago, uh, taking pitches from authors, requesting partials or fulls. So I have that experience. And being on that side of the coin, I can tell you that it's really, it's just a unique situation in general. There are some people that get, like I said, get book deals very quickly, and some don't. But the biggest thing you have to do is you can't sit idle no matter, okay, I got another rejection. I got another rejection. Another publisher rejected us. And we can get depressed, right? So we could sit there and be like, woe is me. But one of the things that I've learned is that you have to just continue to write no matter what the rejection is. You have to continue, because even when you do get a book deal, whether it's a small press or a big five, then then the next thing is sales. Then the next hoop is whether or not you're going to get a lot of 1 stars, or people are not going to connect with your work. So there's always going to be a hurdle, a hill to climb. And what I've learned from having an agent, working at agencies, and then being an author, so seeing both sides of the coin, is you always have to be working on the next thing. So that if you do have a small book deal, they're going to ask you, just like what an agent would ask you, what else do you have? And it's important to not get stuck in the depression of rejection. It is very depressing. I'm not going to lie. It was very discouraging. And then seeing people with other agents getting deals faster, and you go through this. How come they are getting this deal and I'm not? And I've even gone as far as like reading the books, ARC reviews. And I'm going to be honest, I mean, it's all subjective, but there are some people that get humongous book deals and you're kind of like scratching your head. And it's like, I don't understand. Like, the book is good, but it's like you got a 7-figure book deal. It's so you just never know. I think this industry, what people don't like to talk about, is that not all agents are treated equally. There are houses that are more respected in the industry. If you have an agent from Writer's House and they are submitting the same, take two agents, an agent from Writer's House and an unknown agent or a small agent that's just starting out. The same exact book gets submitted as a test. I guarantee you, it's the same exact book, same exact author, two different agents submits it. One that doesn't have that many contacts, another one that is so well known, and they're like, dude, this person reps Stephen King, or this person reps this. They have a big name. I guarantee you, the publisher is going to pick the agent that's submitted from Writer's House because they trust them a little bit more. Is it political? Sure. Is it not fair? Absolutely. But that's the part of the industry, the business side of the industry that a lot of authors don't talk about.
Yeah, being on the hook for that as well. Like, if you're the agent, you know that comes with a lot of pressure and pressure to provide. But I mean, the pressure to provide and you know, you're doing your best, especially if you're one of the ones that are just starting out. If you're doing your best to get it where it can go, I mean, you don't have that weight tossed around on your name yet. You're looking for someone who is going to give you that weight. And unless someone's willing to take that chance, not even just on you, but on the story, you know, you may never get there. And for some people, it is the matter of, you know, it's a great story and what else do they have? But what are you going to do for them? Because they may feel that you may not be the right agent for that story, you know, for that author.
So sometimes, and this is what I would tell people, look, wow, Sonia, you've been you had an agent for 5 years. Can you give us any advice? You know what my advice would be? My advice would be is, I know you feel like having an agent is better than not having one. I know it feels like, well, it's kind of like being in a marriage. Well, I have somebody to come home to. I'm comfortable, even though we're miserable. I'm comfortable. I don't want to have to start the dating pool again. I don't want to have to start all over again. I don't want to have to, put myself out there again. So we get stuck. And in my opinion, if the agent is not helping your career and not doing their part, then do not be afraid to part ways. Do not, I cannot tell you how many authors I have spoken to that basically tell me that they're not happy, that they're miserable, but they're terrified of leaving their agent, because if they leave their agent, who knows how long they're going to get another. What if I never get an agent again? And it's that fear. But so when people tell you having no agent is better than having the wrong agent, it is so true. Not all agents have the same weight behind their name. Not all agents have the contacts. In fact, the publishers, I actually took an editorial acquisitions course through UCLA, and it's a part of their editing and publishing certification. And my instructor that worked at a publishing house, they were honest, and they said, yeah, some publishers, they're getting, the agent could say, well, we submitted. What does that mean? When they say we submitted, that means they shot off an email. On the publishing, you know what I mean? That doesn't mean they read it. That means they might not have even opened up your email. I can't tell the publisher, the person that worked at the publishing house, they don't even open up their emails if it's from a wrong agent.
Yeah.
If it's from a nobody agent or an agent that has bad reputation, and if you want to know more about who has good reputation, who has bad reputation, Writers Beware is a good source, but Absolute Right is a website that honestly has every single good, bad, and ugly experiences. People can write anonymously about their experience with their agent, whether it was good or bad. And there's tons of threads on there. And as a matter of fact, my former agent had a long list of complaints on that thread. And I didn't even see it until we parted ways. So, and then when I started reading the negative reviews, I was like, oh my gosh, these were all reviews from former clients that had terrible experience at that agency. So you have to do your research. Authors have to do their research and decide, how long do I want to stay with this agent? If they're not helping me sell up a book to the big five, then what? I mean, you have also what's your expectation? Because there was another author that I know, their agent from the same agency got them a deal, 40% royalties, 15% of that went to their agent. They were left with a very small chunk what the author gets their cut.
Yeah.
Do the math. 40% royalty, 15 goes to the, and guess what? Here's the rub. The publisher that the agent got this deal at a publishing house that accepted unsolicited author queries. You do not need an agent for that. So that is a bigger rub.
Yeah.
Why do you need an agent to submit you to a small house that you could do by yourself?
Yep. And a lot of the time, that's all that's necessary. Like sometimes, going to bat for yourself is going to be more successful than having someone going to bat for you. And that's where a lot of the indie author community ends up and lies in, is they put in that work themselves, and they know, if something doesn't get done, that's because it fell back on me. I'm not having to worry about someone else not, holding up their end of the bargain or pulling their weight or something like that. And that's not to say that that's the route for everyone, but, there are some that they put in, hundreds of queries just like you did. And they go in and they do those submissions, and they have the agent or they don't have the agent, and they go through all of that, and they get defeated, and they choose to either stop writing because they don't know enough about self-publishing, or they choose to self-publish, and then because they don't have a system, or because other authors they've reached out to have, dare I say, gate-kept information, they feel like they've crashed and burned. And it's one of those, I always have to tell people, your perspective matters a lot, especially when it comes to numbers, because 100 to 200 people doesn't seem like a lot when you're looking in the spans of how many thousands upon thousands of people read and review and etc. watch stuff on the internet. But if you're looking at, for example, you do 3 different posts a day for 3 days. So that's 9 posts over 3 days. And you do them around the same time each day, and you do them on TikTok and Instagram. You get 200 views a video. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's 600 views a day, and that may not be the same 200 people each time. And when you're looking at it in perspective, 200 people doesn't seem like a lot when you're looking at the internet, but if you were to have 200 people standing in front of you, you would most likely be overwhelmed.
Exactly. And it's that self-promotion.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because self-promotion is everything. And gone are the days you think, oh, I'm going to get an agent, and then my agent, the publisher, is going to take care of everything. I don't. That gone are the days where the publisher does
Yeah.
marketing. I mean, sometimes, and it's very selective when from being in behind the scenes, working with agents, working, taking this editorial acquisitions class at UCLA. I learned a lot. It was eye opening how political it is. They literally can pick who they want to make the New York Times. It is okay. We're going to make this person famous because I like their brother, or their brother went to my wedding. I mean, literally, it's infuriating. It's not fair, but I guarantee if they had put the same amount of money behind a BIPOC author that's unknown or whatever, they they would also they would also be a New York Times bestseller. Because think about it, you get the I person, you have the article written in New York Times about you. They have the contacts in terms of marketing contacts. They have a huge pool, and some publishers spend millions behind one single book. But not everybody gets that. And when I took that class, that was probably the most infuriating thing about it, is that there was no rhyme or reason. It's all depends on whether or not, and I mean, not even the editor of the acquisition editor. So a lot of times it's some college student that's 21 years old that is an intern. Literally, I'm not kidding you. Some intern decided to say, "Yeah, you should take a look at this book," and then it gets picked up. It's so random. So that's why I do feel more. I do think people should be more encouraged if they decide to, self-publish. It it's a smart choice, and I could see why they would go that route, especially if you've gone as long as I have. I have 5 years of with an agent, nothing happened. I actually went the small press route, but and there's pros and cons to that, of course, because it depends on how much money you take in. Because you get 50%, like my publisher, a really good royalty rate. People don't understand the way royalties work. 50% for the author is actually a really good royalty rate. A lot of publishers don't even give you 50%. They give you like 40%, and then you have to take 15%, give it to the author, or give it to your agent. So whereas if you self-publish, you're cutting all of that cost, every single sale you make, it's yours. So there's pros and cons to it.
Do you feel like knowing a lot of this, taking that course and kind of getting, I'll say the blinds pulled back from this process, do you think it affect your creativity when it came to the depth of your writing and your process, like how many editorial phases you go through, etc.?
Yeah, you know what? It made me realize big time I have a very strong editorial eye. I've helped publish. I've helped literary agents edit manuscripts, and I was even teamed up with Brian Clems, used to be the former columnist and editor of Writer's Digest, and I worked with his company doing writing. He owns Writing Day workshops. It's a national hub that manages all these in-person and virtual conferences, writing conferences, and I helped edit the first 10 pages and things like that. So it really made me open up my eyes to what maybe the agents are looking for. It helped me to be creative, but it also helped me to think of this as on a business level as well. If there's nothing wrong with writing an alien that comes from Mars and has a unicorn, I mean, imagine if people are like, well, I'm going to write whatever I want to write and I'm going to self-publish. That's good for you. But if you are trying to go small press or traditional, you have to see it as a business, and you have to kind of pay attention to trends. And you do have to pay, I mean, you don't want to write to a trend, because just when you write it, by the time it's actually published, with the editing team has to look at it, the proofreader has to look at it. By the time it's actually published, it's 2 years later, and the trend is already
Yeah.
gone. So you can't really write to a trend. But what this has taught me is, there's nothing wrong with looking at it from the business side of it. There's nothing wrong with saying, I want to make money. There's nothing
Mm-hmm.
wrong with saying, I want to have something a little more commercial. I don't want to write an alien coming down from Mars riding a unicorn. I, I don't, I need to be kind of, if it's too out of the box, publishers and agents, they don't know where it's going to live on the
Yeah.
shelf.
Yeah.
If there's no comp, if you cannot comp, well, there is no book. There is no book. Look how unique I am. I'm writing the alien with the unicorns. I'm so unique. You could be too unique, where it doesn't fit anywhere, and you lose your audience, and it becomes kind of selfish. Like, well, I want to write because I like it. Well, authors have to also say, I have to keep my audience in mind. And there's nothing wrong with saying, I want to keep my audience in mind. I want to make
Mm-hmm.
money. I want a book that's going to sell. I want a book that's going to be commercial. I want a book that I can market and that I can comp that. Hey, if you like the girl with the dragon tattoo, you're going to love the Serpent series. And that, which is part of my marketing campaign. And
Yeah.
automatically people have a vision in terms of, oh, it's kind of like vigilante justice, like, oh, like the girl with the dragon tattoo, like Dexter. The girl with the dragon tattoo meets Dexter.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately people have a concept in their mind. So that's kind of what I learned. I learned not so much the creativity part, but writing through the pain, writing through the rejection,
Yeah.
fueling your pain and the depression and the, because I deal with depression and I deal with anxiety clinically.
Mm-hmm.
So add the the piles of rejection that it's authors get an inhuman amount of rejection. Um, but at the end of the day, I really learned a lot about the business side of it and the marketing side of it. And also that it's politics, that there's a lot of politics involved. And it really does come
Yeah.
down to, you can have the best book in the world, but if the wrong person is submitting it to publishers, the publishers might not even open up that agent's email, especially if that agent has negative reviews on threads like Absolute Right, where it's extremely public. Um, Everything is digital now. So businesses, all you need is several negative reviews on Yelp, and people are not going to go to your store. I mean, everything is so public and it's so online. You cannot, and you know what's interesting? I don't know if you know anything about Absolute Right, but Absolute Right does not allow for deletion. You can't, once you post a negative review about somebody, it cannot be eradicated. It's going to
Yeah.
live on the internet forever. And that's the scary part. And that's the part that I don't, that's why I was offered a chance to become a literary agent, and I turned it down because I saw what it took. I saw how hard it is. People don't realize agents do not get paid unless they sell a book. So they're 100% commission. Agents do not work hourly, on an hourly basis.
So, do you feel like we know this affected your writing, as you said. It made you be a little bit more driven, and you said it didn't necessarily affect your creativity. Do you feel like it pushed you to look for more inspiration on things that were worldly, since you knew that if you were too unique, you'd have maybe less of a chance?
Yeah, honestly, I people um authors especially want to say, I you have to be original and write the story that you want to write. But I do feel like it's helped me to keep in mind my audience and be and look and think of stories that is not just for you. You have to think of a story that's gonna, how, like you said, 200 eyeballs. How many eyeballs, how many people do you want this book to reach? The more general and the more broad you are, and if you can at least understand your genre, that's another big one. I really learned a lot about word count and genre, and keeping that in mind when writing your next story.
Mm-hmm. So, where do you find inspiration for your stories and your characters?
I'm a I'm a dark thriller detective writer, and
Mm-hmm.
my dad was in the military, and he was also former Border Patrol and U.S. Customs agent. And
Mm-hmm.
my uncle, Nicholas Estavillo, was the highest ranking Puerto Rican to make 3-star in New York history. He was there for 9/11. He was there for all the major events.
Wow,
He's now retired, but he has a whole family. Yeah, his daughter was a high ranking detective. His son was another high ranking cop. But he has his own Wikipedia page and everything. He went to FBI Academy. He was a Vietnam vet. He was an ex-Marine. So he was a real like superhero kind of character. So he really,
absolutely.
my law enforcement side of me, of my family, inspired my ideas. And also I'm a huge true crime fanatic. I've watched every true crime show there is out there. I've even ran out of material to watch. So that's my inspiration comes from, the evils, the things that people do that is real.
Yeah.
The depravity, the vengeance, or murdering for money, or whatever the case is. I like exploring the detective world and fusing my family's history in law enforcement with my passion for crime.
That's amazing. That's quite the list of accomplishments that your family has, and that's, I feel like that would probably give you a lot of opportunity to kind of delve into that world and get an idea, because in your mind it would be one of those, you get the eyes behind the detective and kind of get a feel for how they would work the case and how it would feel to have those traumas and those
Exactly.
things. And I don't want to necessarily say it's easier to slip in the mind of the villain, but sometimes when you know the mentality behind the figuring
Right.
out who it was, you kind of have to slip into the mind of the villain to figure out why, because that is part of what cops use to find people who have done some heinous things, is motive. The why behind all of that.
Exactly. I've always found it fascinating. I've always found motive to be fascinating. And I've also learned a lot because
Hmm.
I lean towards being a feminist author, and I learned a lot when investigating it, that women have a completely different motive than men. Women are driven more by
Hmm.
honestly, revenge. Um, and men are, I mean, and sometimes women are that they do the whole add add something to someone's drink, and all of a sudden their husband starts to get sicker and sicker and sicker, and lo and behold, they've been
Hmm.
poisoning the husband for their insurance money. So that's a very common a motive that I've learned in doing a lot of my research. But I've always found, like you said, the motive is very interesting, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. Um, have you ever considered writing outside of your genre?
Yeah, I thought about that because I know fantasy is a real big one, but that's one that if there's ever one genre that I probably cannot write,
Mm-hmm.
it's just my brain isn't wired that way, is fantasy and
Yeah.
sci-fi. I think if I were to ever write something sci-fi, it would be more realistic sci-fi and not sci-fi that is too hard-boiled. It would be I don't know if you've ever read Dark Matter by Blake Crouch, but
Not yet, but I'll put it on my
it's
to be
such a
on.
good, it was so good that it became a TV show. So it's basically
Okay.
about time travel, and it is done very, very well. It's a genre bender. It's kind of a thriller. It's kind of a mystery. There's some romance in there, but then it's also a sci-fi. So it kind of does this weird, the unique genre bending time travel without being too outside of the norm to turn off audience. It attracted a huge, that's one perfect example where it was a genre bending book that attracted a gigantic
Mm-hmm.
audience. So it's if I ever did something like that, uh, I would probably do some kind of a genre mashup between thriller and sci-fi. But even then, it's out of my comfort zone. My so yeah, I would definitely try to explore maybe horror.
Mm-hmm.
I thought about writing horror. That's one thing I wanted to explore.
Yeah, it seems like that would be like probably the
It's
closest to where
closer
you're.
to thriller. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Do you read at the same time that you write? Like, do you read other stories?
Yeah, I'm constantly reading, but I have ADHD,
Yeah.
and so um have to I have to literally be listening to the book. I actually um use Speechify Pro so that I could upload my own manuscript. And I like to listen, and you'll be surprised if you listen to your book out loud when you're especially during the editing phase, you can really catch a lot
Mm-hmm.
of errors. Because you could hear the error, you could hear the awkward sentence, you could hear whether or not dialogue sounds natural. And with voice AI voices these days, it literally it's amazing that Speechify Pro has perfected their speech narration, where it almost sounds like a professional narrator
Yeah.
is reading your book. So that's kind of my process. I like to read books, but I have become, because I have kids, and it gets so crammed. I don't like clutter. I used to have a huge books collection, and I was living in New York, and I was going to grad school. After grad school, I decided to move back to California, Los Angeles, and I literally donated like hundreds of books because I just could
Mm.
not ship them. The shipping cost alone would have been thousands of dollars. So it
Yeah.
made me think more digital. And I know there's a lot of people that still like paperback. I have become more of a e-reader myself.
Yeah. That's okay. Everybody has their preferences, and it sounds like between ebooks and audiobooks, you probably have your hands full.
Yes, yes, exactly. Um, yeah.
So I know you said you like crime, true crime and murder mystery, that kind of thing. Do you read mostly the same as what you write, or do you feel like that
You know what? You know
inhibits?
what's Yeah, I feel like it inhibits because
Hmm.
one person, it was so interesting. There was a fantasy writer. I reached out to them. I literally was going to offer a free book. I said, I'd like to give you a free book. Just read it if you'd like, and maybe write a review. The person said they did not know how to read a thriller. That was their word. They said they did not know how to read a thriller or respond to a thriller. And I thought that was such an interesting. I'm like, really? First of all, it doesn't matter what genre you write. Every genre has a act one, act
Mm-hmm.
two, act three. They have character arcs. Every character struggles with some kind of threat. They have to overcome that threat. There has to be stakes involved. The character has to have enough motive and agency to move the story forward. That applies to all
Mm-hmm.
genres. So when I hear some readers or some authors that say, no, I can't read your thriller book because I've never read a thriller book in my life, I think that's being kind of narrow minded. I think that you become a better writer by
Yeah.
reading widely. It's just like reading, it's just like learning about different cultures, learning about different ethnicities, being putting on your sociology hat and learning about different cultures so you can write about them. How are you going to ever know how to write different ethnicities and different cultures if you only stick to one theme,
Yeah.
one
100%.
genre? I just yeah, maybe I'm being a little judgmental, but it's just my personal opinion that I have been a multi-genre reader, and I had to be when I was working at the literary agencies. And as an assistant there, I had to read everything. I read YA, fantasy, erotica. I mean, horror, hard-boiled detective, soft police procedurals, science fiction. Every romance, every single genre you can think of, from picture books to adult. I've read it, and I feel proud of that because when people reach out to me on social media and say, "Hey, can you be an ARC reader? Can you beta read this book?" I can say yes to almost every opportunity. Even if it's not my genre, I will always read a book, especially indie authors and small press authors. I always give those books a chance, no matter what genre it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like reading every genre, being able to give everything a chance, speaks a lot to diversity, and not just like I was talking to someone about this earlier, but diversity in yourself in reading, but if you're an author and you're diversifying what you're reading, it gives you the ability to, like you said, diversify your characters as well. Because how do you not learn about other cultures and other people and how to correctly represent them in your own stories?
Exactly. Like I know CW Rose. I think you had her
Mm-hmm.
on the
She's amazing.
podcast. Ocean Song.
Yes.
So yeah, that's how I learned about your podcast. I saw a little ad on her Instagram about it, and so perfect example. Her story is a mermaid story, is a mermaid romance story,
Mm-hmm.
and guess what? I'm a detective thriller, but I read it and I really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
I gave it a 5-star review, and now I'm reading my second mermaid story. Um, I've even read sci-fi steampunk kind of stories. I've even
Mm-hmm.
read vampire stories that were like 200,000 pages word count. Um, but yeah, I think it's important to give every book a shit chance, and that also equals different lengths of books. If you're
Mm-hmm.
stuck on novellas or in short stories, you're going to have such a short attention span. You're not going to be able to finish a 600-page book. But like I finished reading Sleeping Beauties by Stephen King and his son.
Mm-hmm.
They co-wrote that book, and that book was like 900 pages. It was
Goodness.
really long. Yeah, and I still read it. I finished it. I gave it 5 stars. It was absolutely amazing. I think it's going to be a movie or a TV series. But
Mhm.
that one was really weird. It was horror mixed in with a little bit of sci-fi. It was really unique. Um, but yeah, and actually, as a biracial individual, I think my ethnicity, my dual ethnicity, I'm half Korean and half Puerto Rican. It
Mhm.
allows me to understand both sides. Like I write diverse characters, but I also have a story where it was a Korean themed psychological thriller. So it makes me, it allows me to write diverse characters. And I think being a diverse reader helps big time.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so you mentioned about your plot earlier and being able to, make sure that if you're able to do that research because you read and you do the research for other cultures and everything, how does that fit into, you know do you, as far as like plotting out your story, is it one of those situations where you can actually like plot out everything, or is it more of like a I have the pieces of the puzzle and I just pants them together?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Yeah, so I'm a hybrid between a plotter and a pantser, and I having a screenwriting background.
Hmm.
Um, During my undergrad years, I won some awards. I won like the David Toohey Award for screenwriting, the Carl Foreman Award for filmmaking, and my short film was uh, made best film at the Latina Film Festival.
Wow.
And so having a screenwriting background and knowing how to write short, punchy, because it's a lot more stripped down. It's mostly dialogue and one or two sentence narration and nothing more. But it's kind of like a screenplay is almost like an outline for a
Hmm.
book. And if you know how to write screenplays, if you learn, it does give you a better idea in terms of plotting. So I do think that I pants quite a bit, but I do like to at least come up with a beat sheet, a general beat sheet. I always come up with a character sketch, not an actual physical picture, although sometimes it's nice to get a picture, just an image of somebody uh, that would play the character.
Hmm.
It's more or less a character development backstory. What would this character's dating profile look like on the internet? What's their what you know what I mean? What's their age? What is their
Yeah.
favorite color? What is what are they what makes them tick? Do they have a bad habit? I really love exploring morally gray characters where they're kind of villainous and they kind of break the law,
Mm.
but you root for them for some reason. So
Hmm.
I like making characters flawed. Like my character, Detective Anaya Nazario, is a recovering alcoholic, and she has intimacy issues because her father died when she was 18. And so one man you've ever loved your whole life dies. It made her have intimacy issues. So in the Serpent's Bridge, she's trying to solve a case where uh, undocumented immigrants are being targeted by a serial killer, and she has to keep that
Hmm.
leadless case open because LAPD wants to shut it down because it's just undocumented immigrants. We don't even have next of kin or their real name because a lot of times they use false names. So let's just shut this case.
Yeah.
And I wanted to explore the societal um, aspect of it and kind of humanize the undocumented immigrant story, but at the same time, tell the story from the detective side that has a job to do. So in that book, I try to be fair as possible. Um, but yeah, going back to my story, that's part of part of writing it was definitely inspired by my mom being an immigrant to this country, and being a Korean immigrant to this country. So I'm in a unique situation because I'm BIPOC, but I have BIPOC police officers. People think, well, police officers are all white. No, they're not. No, they're not.
Mm-mm.
They're all bad. They're
No.
all bad. No, they're not. There are good cops. There are bad cops. There are bad people in every career. There are good
Mm-hmm.
agents. There are bad agents. I'm not going to lie. They're literally agents that literally will drag an author's career for years if you're with the wrong agent. Um, so
Yeah.
I like to explore morally gray characters, and I like to be fair and show all sides. And I think that that's what I did with I think I did a good job based on what my readers have said. Um, I like to be politically in the middle. I'm not preaching to people from the left. I'm not preaching from the right side. It's right down the middle, kind of where my politics are.
Yeah. I do. I 100% agree with you about, there are good cops, there are bad cops, there are good politicians, there are bad politicians. I feel like that follows for everything. And
Exactly.
one of my,
Yeah.
I also fall right down in the middle when it comes to a lot of political things. And I try not to go there with any conversation, whether that be personal, family, mainly because, for example, say you have
It becomes
yeah,
crazy. It
well,
becomes
yes.
crazy.
But for example, say you've got, a batch of strawberries. You go to the store and you pick one up and you look through the thing and they all look great. And then when you get home and you go to rinse them out and you're washing them, you're expecting them, you don't catch one that has just been damaged a little bit. And so you cut the tops off and you do whatever you want with them, put them in a different container that allows them to breathe. And you come back the next morning and all of a sudden you have a clump of, strawberries at the bottom that now have mold on them because that one that you missed that had
Yep.
just a bruise on the side or had this small cut on the side. And the same thing can be said for apples. If apples bruise and you break the skin and they start to leak some of the moisture, they then turn that side of that apple and the others around them rotten. And that's what it is. It takes one bad piece, one bad
Yes.
spot to soil a larger group. And it's just, it's like moth to a flame
It's
sort
so
of
true.
situation.
Uh,
And the thing is like it's not even the spot is bad, and it's also one of those situations of like the blind leading the blind, and that one does not represent the whole because you still have a larger
you're
portion of it
right.
that is good, it's fine.
Yeah. So I do think that it's important to be aware of that when you're writing stories,
Mm-hmm.
because I do feel like authors have a responsibility to the public. Books that could be very controversial or they get it wrong,
Yeah.
can really cause a huge uproar. I don't know if you remember American Dirt.
Mm.
That was an example of an author. The author identified as white.
Oh yes.
They had a very small percentage. Yeah, they had a very, 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 very small percentage of Hispanic. I don't even think Mexican. I think it was. So then she wrote American Dirt, even though she wrote I think it was an essay or it was some kind of comment that was caught where she made a comment about being white. And she said she was white. And then she writes this whole ethnic book and she got slaughtered.
Mm-hmm.
A really popular Hispanic community activists, people who are well known, like Hispanic influencers. She just got everybody wrote a negative blog about it. I mean, they wrote negative review. And it got so bad that Stephen King came out in her defense, and said something on X in her defense.
Mm.
But that was an interesting story because, and that's where like how you can potentially get it wrong with
Yeah.
especially cultural sensitivity and ethnicity. If you haven't actually lived through it and you're, an indigenous person might want to read a book from an indigenous individual instead of somebody who's not even related to the ethnicity, but it's popular to write BIPOC stories. So I'm going to write a bunch of BIPOC characters because it's popular. It's the thing to do.
Yeah.
You have to be careful because people get sensitive when they read your book and they find out the author is this ethnicity, but they're writing about this other ethnicity
Mm-hmm.
that they've never even lived through. Um, yeah, that's where cultural sensitivity, I think, I it's a difficult
For
balance.
sure. And I feel like that turns a lot of people, like, for me, as a white woman, I would be hesitant to write BIPOC characters into my story for that reason alone. I know
Right.
my
Exactly.
history, and for me, it was absolutely nothing. I grew up in not a white community in my city. I grew up in the BIPOC
Uh-huh.
community, but I am not a BIPOC person, so I do not have
Yeah,
the same experiences
exactly.
as they do. And so I can write about
Yeah.
my version of going through those things with them, but that doesn't necessarily, and it
Yeah.
would still be one of those, I wouldn't necessarily want to try to explain. It would still give me hesitation to try to explain those experiences
I
because I
know.
don't know what it's like for them.
Yeah.
And all I can do is say, because there are authors who, like myself, or who are Hispanic, who want to write of a different ethnicity, and they go to someone who they know
Right.
who is a friend and they say, hey, can you tell me about, can you read this, can you help me with the
Yeah,
language,
research.
and yes, and do that sort of thing. And I feel like that that lessens the weight a little bit of not necessarily the guilt but the worry that you won't do it
Yeah.
justice, but it also is a certain
Right.
level of respect that is just bestowed upon that community. I have enough respect for you guys and for my friend, and for what you've been through to ask these questions and to say, hey, can you make sure I have this right? And that often levels the playing field. Because if you can put that notice in the front of
Yeah.
your book and say, this was done, these are complete works of fiction, but I took the time to make sure that people,
Sensitivity
yeah, my
readers. Yeah.
sensitivity readers were part of this, and all of that. And then typically people are going, oh, okay, they did some sort of research. And if you don't know if they did or not, you can very easily say, hey, I found some, most authors, they're, while I say this, I can easily say these are just mainly the ones I've worked with, but they have no problem telling you they worked with sensitivity readers. And they have no problem telling you who they were that
Yeah.
was connected to them and how closely that person worked on their story. And typically you can just say, hey, can you tell me about how you did the research for this character or for this ethnicity or for this culture? And they're happy to share.
Yeah. Exactly. I think the only caveat I will say is that this people who are just starting out, I think, have a harder time breaking through in terms of
Mm-hmm.
pushing the envelope.
Yeah.
With pushing the envelope, whether it's writing different ethnicities or pushing the envelope with writing very sensitive trigger type of stories.
Mm-hmm.
But then once you become known and once you're Stephen King, honestly, I mean, it's like you could almost write any controversial thing and however many BIPOC characters you want, and you can basically get away with it. Uh, I
Yeah.
think sometimes maybe they don't, like J.K. Rowling with the transgender comments. I think
Yeah.
that became sensitive enough, or there's enough people like disliking her now, but it doesn't matter because
Hmm.
she's a billionaire, so it doesn't really matter. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I do think that there's a little more leeway with authors of all stripes and colors and love interest preferences and whatever. Um, I think there's just more leeway if you're already a known author.
Yeah. And it makes me wonder because, someone like Stephen King or even like Jodi Picoult,
Oh
um,
yeah,
she
yeah,
has so many great stories that she has written. But at the same time, a lot of those stories touch on very sensitive topics. I mean, Small Great Things is about essentially the KKK.
yeah,
And it was hard to read. It was
yeah,
so hard to read because it was like, who in their right mind would ever have so much hate that
yeah,
they would really and truly believe that this person intentionally withheld care? And like,
yeah,
yes, if you read it, there is a slight hesitation because it's, I want to help, but I don't want to help and something go wrong, and then I'm still blamed. But I mean,
yeah,
that is just the essence of, you know, you when you get to that point, you've written so many things that you can write about just about anything and it not come off wrong.
yeah. I would love to be in that. I think every author's dream is to be in that situation. And I think that's why some people go self-published route because
Hmm.
they can put it out there and they don't care. They'll like bring on the 1 stars, bring on the haters that are going to get on social
Hmm.
media and I don't care. This is the story that I wanted. It's controversial for X, Y, and Z reasons. I don't care. And I have friends that are like that. They're like, I don't care. I'm writing it and I'm publishing it. I'm not even going to worry about the agents because they're gonna flag this book. I don't care. I'm doing it. And
Yeah.
I would love to be in that situation. I don't feel like even as a BIPOC person, I still worry about getting it
Hmm.
wrong. Even myself, I still have my do sensitivity readers.
Yeah.
Um, just because we're living in a world of sensitivity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that because I mean, it
No,
takes,
no.
I've always said this, it takes all kinds of kind to make the world go round. And that just means that, you know, for example, I'm a reader who has no triggers. I can
Me
easily read
too.
just about anything you throw at me. I can read it. So I read Small
Me
Great
too.
Things, and I mean, I had it made me sick because as a young white woman, I know that that's what it was. And it makes me sick to think that people like my stepdad and a lot of my friends and their
Yeah.
parents and their great grandparents had to go through things like that.
Yeah.
Because my mom is married to a black man, and I have a lot of BIPOC friends and family now. Um, and I
Yeah.
was ingrained, yeah, I was ingrained in that. That was part of the side of the city that I lived in for many years of my childhood, and so those people are close to me. There are a lot of people in the BIPOC community that are very
Yeah.
close to me and dear to my heart, and so yes, it made me sick. But then I also read it with an air of, she wrote this to bring awareness to the people who did not experience this, to people who needed to read it and get a sense of familiarity of the type of trepidation that it causes you to want to help and not be allowed to.
Exactly. Exactly. Have you read Brother?
Not yet.
That's crazy. That writer, she's no hold bar. I mean, she wrote it. She just said, I don't
Mhm.
care. And there is an audience for it. There's people that obviously still will trash the book because
Yeah.
they don't like how dark it is. I mean, it's definitely darker than anything Stephen King has ever written. But yeah, I don't have any triggers either. I have, in my opinion, I see it as art.
Mm-hmm.
I can separate my emotions from any kind of psychological trigger that might, I don't internalize like, oh my gosh, I'm reading this book and all of a sudden if it's a sexual assault, I'm getting assaulted as I read this book. Um, I don't really have that trigger, but I do know other people do. And actually, book two, The Serpent Woman, I do dedicate it to sexual assault survivors. And
Mm-hmm.
I do in my marketing copy, I, I put the trigger on the marketing copy. The publisher did not want to put the triggers in the book. They felt it was enough to put the triggers on the marketing copy, like on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah. And with trigger warnings, there is a slight fear that people might be turned off by that, but at least
Yeah.
it's better to have them than to have the review say, I am so upset that this person did not have a trigger warning. How dare they? And then they can trash you just for not having that trigger warning. I would rather have a reader say, oh, it has that in it. Yeah, I'm not going to read this book. I'm not going to buy it. I would rather have them not buy it than have the negative attention of people bad mouthing you because you didn't put the trigger warning in it.
Yeah. And I can't blame you on that one either. I mean, a lot of people think no publicity is bad publicity, and hats off to the authors who will use those 1 stars as their own marketing and stuff. But at the same time,
Yeah.
there is a certain level of confidence you have to have, and just sureness in what you wrote. And also, nowadays we live in a very,
Right.
very whip flash cancel culture. I mean, in a very quick
Cancel
instant,
culture. I was
your
about to say
world can
that. Yeah.
turn
Yeah.
upside down.
Well, Caitlin, the girl that did that wrote a bunch of the 1 stars, um, the she had a really good publishing deal with an
Mm-hmm.
agent, a publishing deal with one of the big five. Then she created a bunch of fake accounts on Goodreads and started 1 starring a bunch of BIPOC authors. Do you
Yes, I
remember
do
that?
remember that.
The Kate Corain
Mm-hmm.
situation. And it's amazing like how fat, I mean, like, I, of course I'm upset at what she did, but at the same time, I kind of feel sorry for her because, making a bad judgment call and then all of a sudden everything is taken away almost overnight.
Yeah.
It's crazy. That's what I keep that in mind, so I don't want to make
Mm-hmm.
mistakes. I will research if I'm trying to write a gay character. I have a lot of gay friends. My best friend of 20 years. So I always go to them and I double check, triple check, because I don't want to get it wrong. I don't want to write a 400-page book and then, oops, I got it wrong. I have to rewrite the whole thing. Or you get it published and all of a sudden people are like talking crap about you because you got it wrong. Definitely don't want to get it wrong, and with this cancel culture for sure.
Yeah. It's such a very peculiar situation to be in.
Yeah. Yeah, because you want to be yourself. You want to say, I don't care if I get judged. I'm just like the brother, like the Anita author. I forget her last name. The author of Brother. She is her books are extremely controversial. I mean, I tried to read another one recently, and it was just I wasn't triggered. It was just the extremeness of the situation was almost like I was watching a snuff film. It was almost like, let me see how extreme I could write. I could make this situation, and for that reason, I wasn't able to get through it. I just wasn't able to finish it, and not because of triggers, just the I don't know the extremeness of it. So it's a balance.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I know some people they don't mind. They write whatever they want, but in my case, I feel like I'm a BIPOC author, and I'm not a big name author. I can't get away with getting it wrong. I just can't. I'm still a newbie at this. And once you make a name for yourself, you can be a little bit cockier, and you could say, "F everybody. I'm going to write this, and I don't care what anybody thinks." I'm not there yet. Maybe one day I'll be there.
I plan on following you to the end. So when you get there, I will still be here. I'll be cheering you on.
How long have you been doing this podcast?
We have been going since early March this year, so we're slowly approaching a year, and it has been a really wild journey, to be honest. I did not expect to get as far as I have. I started this as really just a way for me to communicate with authors and share with my friends, the 20, 25 or so of us that are in a group. And I have a Facebook group for the podcast, and I'm in a couple others, and I'm in a Discord that supports me. But it was really just one of those, like, I want to share with who I can, and just talk to my friends about books as well as authors. And it really took off with the authors wanting to put their stuff out there. And now I have more views than I thought I would, and I have more followers than I thought I would. And just the interest alone from people wanting to chat about what they're creating and what they're reading has grown. Yeah, it really is an honor.
That's so awesome.
And people are always like, "Thank you so much for having me." And I'm like, I do not even know where I would be without you. Like, honestly, it is.
Well, I'll definitely share. I'll share across my platform the link and the image, and like CW did.
Yeah. It is authors like you guys who continue to share and see your friends are all the ones who come to me, and I'm like, oh, you're gonna make me cry. I'm just a young little, I'm not gonna say little, but I'm just a 24-year-old girl in Texas who,
I thought about Texas. I was born in Dallas, Texas.
I'm actually not far outside of Dallas, but yeah, I'm 24-year-old woman married right outside of Northeast Texas in the Dallas area, and I've been a reader all my life, but I really got back into it after COVID when I got married, and it's just been one of those rides where being able to talk to people and get back into the community and see how much it's grown and changed really since COVID, and how many people are here and supporting one another, and being able to share this love and the share of the difference of opinions. I mean,
yeah, I'm very glad that I got to meet you, and I can't wait to also follow your podcast too.
Thank you. I think that's all I have. Did you have anything you wanted to talk about?
I think I covered a lot. I think mostly that I think at the end of the day, I think we covered a lot. Like there's good and bad in everything. I didn't want people to think that having an agent is a bad thing. It's not, but it's not all what it's cut out to be.
Yeah.
People you hear all the stories of how quickly a person got a book deal, but you never hear the stories where the person was on submission for seven. I know another author that was on submission with seven. There was 8 books, that they were rejected 8 books before one of those before maybe the 9th book got picked up by one of the big 5.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank
I
you.
really enjoyed our chat, and I'll make sure to get all of your information into the show notes so that everyone can follow and see what you're up to.
Okay, thank you.